Hello again everyone from Tokyo, Japan, and welcome back to Japan Vintage Camera. It's a very chilly morning here in Tokyo this morning. It's Saturday, between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, something like that. Very beautiful morning. The skies are very bright blue and the air is nice and clean and clear, as it usually is when the weather is colder here. It's going to be quite busy at the park later on today, as the Christmas decorations are all up and ready and the ice skating rink is finally open for business. It was supposed to be open on November 19th, but the weather was too warm that week and they couldn't get the ice to freeze. But now it's cool enough, and for the last few days people have been enjoying the skating. And a lot of people will come here this weekend, especially to enjoy it, because it's such a beautiful day and it's nice to be able to do ice skating outdoors here in Tokyo. The winters here are normally not very cold. They're a little chilly, but nothing like what we get in like the Midwest of America and other places. So nice time of year. It's been quite busy this week. I've sold a lot of cameras this week, and for those of you who bought cameras from me, thank you very much. For those of you who are new to my channel, I sell vintage Japanese cameras in my online store, japanvintagecamera.com, and my Etsy store, which is also called Japan Vintage Camera. So if you're interested in buying a camera like the one I'm going to be reviewing today, please visit my stores and see what I have available. I've received a large number of cameras yesterday, and I'll be receiving more today, so I plan to list these in my stores as quickly as I can. So if you're interested in seeing what new cameras I have available, please check later on tonight. I should have quite a few more listed. The camera I'm going to be talking about today is a Ricoh camera. This particular one is the Ricoh 300S. The original Ricoh 300 was released in the late 1950s and was quite a popular camera for Ricoh. It was mainly for the main market or main consumer market, and was a simple and reasonably priced camera which featured some of the strong features of the earlier Ricoh 35 series, but with a more modern and compact design. The Ricoh 300S was an improvement over the regular Ricoh 300s and was the last of the 300 series. Compared to the earlier Ricoh 300, the appearance is the main thing you notice, the main difference. Mechanically, it's about the same as the earlier cameras. The difference in the appearance you can kind of see in the gray leatherette which is used on the camera, and some of the gray and black plastic trim which they used to replace the chrome-plated metal trim on the earlier cameras, and also the black dials on the lens for the controls. So overall, I think it's kind of an improvement in the appearance, and also the controls are made a little bit larger and easier to use, which makes this a little bit more of a user-friendly camera than the earlier 300s. So the Ricoh 300S is a fully mechanical rangefinder camera. It doesn't use any batteries and it has full manual operation. All the controls of the camera are full manual. To use this camera, to get the best possible use out of this camera, if you're not familiar with film photography, you're going to need a handheld light meter or a light meter app for your smartphone. Being that this is a film camera, it is quite capable of taking really high-resolution photographs, and despite its simplicity and how primitive it is, you're still going to get better resolution and better dynamic range from this camera than you'll get from pretty much any modern digital camera. So, digital still has a ways to go before it catches up with film, and that's why film seems to be, I guess, holding on, even here in 2020. And it seems to be making some kind of return to popularity, at least the interest I'm getting in my stores for my film cameras that would say that. So, yeah, despite its simplicity and old age, it can take really amazing photographs. The main feature of this camera is the 45mm f2.8 lens, which was carried over from the earlier Ricoh 35 cameras. It was quite an amazing performer, and as they used this lens for, say, maybe a dozen years in their different cameras, this shows how good of a lens it was. They didn't have to change the formula or replace it with a new design. The design which they had been using was quite proven and was quite popular with photographers at the time. Let's go ahead and take a look at the features, controls, and functions of the Ricoh 300S, and we're going to go ahead and start at the top. And here we have the film rewind knob, and you simply pull this up to make it a little bit easier to rewind the film. Around the inside of the knob we have a series of numbers here, and this is to remind you of what kind of film you have loaded in the camera. So when you load the film in the camera, you would take a look at the film speed and it'd be like 100, 200, or 400, and then you would simply turn the dial on the top so that number would match or line up with the black dots on either side of the ring. It has ASA numbers for one side or DIN numbers for the other. We don't use DIN numbers anymore, just ASA. So if I'm using, say, ASA 200 film, I would simply turn this so the 200 would line up with the black dot here. This doesn't have any effect on the operation of the camera. You really don't have to set this dial if you don't need to. This is just a reminder. Later cameras usually had a pocket or something on the back where you would put the top of the top flap of the film box to remind you what kind of film you had in the camera. Earlier ones didn't have that. They had some kind of mechanical dial or or a slider or something like that. This doesn't affect the operation of the camera. Moving over, we have a small screw here on the top cover. If you remove this screw, deep underneath you'll find the access screw for adjusting the rangefinder. Next to that we have a shoe for mounting a flash gun, and this is a hot shoe, so you can use a modern strobe flash in this camera. Unlike earlier cameras, earlier Ricoh 300s and the 35 series, there's no flash sync socket on this camera, so you're pretty much limited to using a flash with a pickup on the bottom, which is pretty easy because that's pretty much all modern flashes. Over here we have the shutter release button, which accepts a standard cable release, and here we have the film winding and shutter charging lever, and next to that we have the film counter window. On the back here we have the viewfinder window, and a little bit larger of a window than they had in some of the earlier cameras, and a square window instead of the round window which we find on the earlier Ricoh series cameras. We have two screws on the back. One is for holding on the top cover, and the other one is another access for making the other adjustment on the rangefinder. Here we have the view. Excuse my coughing here. It's kind of the dry air here has got my throat a little stuck, so pardon the interference from the coughing. I hope it goes away soon. So on the top here we have the viewfinder windows. This is the viewfinder window on this side and the rangefinder window, and we have the matte glass on the front, which is in front of the frame lines. And the Ricoh features projected frame lines onto a beam splitting mirror, which is quite an improvement over earlier like bright line frame lines. It makes it a little bit easier to use these and makes it easier to compose and I guess line up your photographs. This camera doesn't feature parallax correction, but there are lines or marks on the frame lines which you would use for shooting at infinity or close focus. Below that we have the lens controls, and all the important controls are on the lens body. In the back here, on the ring closest to the camera, we have the aperture adjustment, and this camera features a range of f2.8 to f22. In front of that we have the shutter speed selector ring, and as this is the 300, it has a rather simple shutter with a setting of B or bulb, and then 1/4 of a second to 1/300th of a second. And in front of that we have the focusing ring, which is arranged in meters, and you can see the white numbers here in the front that shows the focusing distance or focusing scale. Behind that, on the silver ring, we have the depth of field scale, which will remind you how much depth of field you have for any given aperture. There are no EV numbers or anything like that, so none of the I guess added complications that some of the more expensive or highly featured cameras of this era had. So quite simple to use. If I were using this camera, I would simply, using my handheld light meter, I would program, or I guess smartphone app, program the film speed that I'm using and the aperture which I want to use, and simply take a light reading and use the recommended shutter speed. Or I could do it the opposite way. I could program the shutter speed that I want to use in my app, and then it would give me the appropriate f-stop or aperture setting to use. So it takes maybe not much time to get used to making the adjustments on a mechanical camera. Maybe half an hour or so you can figure out how it works and all that, enough to be able to take good photographs once you shoot a few rolls through one of these cameras, you can kind of figure out how to do the settings without even relying on the light meter anymore. It's not really all that difficult. To load the film in the camera, you have to open the film door. There's a latch on the bottom of the rear cover, and you pull that downward, and the film door opens like so. To load the film in the camera, go ahead and push up on this fork here, and that pops up the winding knob. You would drop your film cartridge in this side, and then pull this back down so it locks the cartridge into place, and then pull the film meter across the film chamber, and then feed it into the slot here where you can see this chrome bar, and simply turn the spool with your thumb. You can see the white arrow which shows you which way to turn it, and simply wind it until the film pulls all the way across and is being pulled over the teeth on the cog here. Once you have it lined up a little bit, just wind the camera 1 or 2 strokes, making sure that the holes are lined up on these teeth. Close the film door and simply wind the camera till the number 1 lines up in the film counter window, and you're good to go. So overall, it's a nice camera, a very high quality camera, quite easy to use, quite reliable. There's very little in this camera to go wrong. The 45mm f2.8 lens is a wonderful performer and capable of taking really wonderful pictures. These are really nice cameras, and I'll be listing this camera later today on my Etsy store and my new online store, JapanVintageCamera.com. So if you're interested in seeing this camera or buying it, or the other cameras I'll be listing today, please check out my online stores. I plan to be listing more cameras shortly, as I said, and I also plan to be making more videos. I'm receiving more cameras which I haven't reviewed before, so if you're interested in seeing these reviews, please subscribe. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you tune in again soon.